She made the same exact equivocation.
There was no debate.
Maybe look at this review. You see
Call it whatever. Look,
yelling.
if you,
It was just
I could be more honest about how I'm representing it and call it a spank, right? It doesn't matter. The point is that you made the same mistake yesterday when.
So
what is?
So here's the way I think they do it. I think that they do admit, and they start off that way. That in capitalism, right, things aren't going to get priced if there is no demand. So, but let's talk about the things for which there is a demand, and let's see if we can figure out what it is that's causing prices to fluctuate around that equilibrium point. Because there's no right now theory for what that is. And so then he postulates value using his definition to explain that. So it doesn't matter. I mean, it's a kind of a critique of capitalism, and they just grant that in capitalism, things aren't going to be, at least not continually, created for which there's no demand. But that doesn't seem to me to go against the labor theory of value. It seems to be perfectly fine to accept that demand drives price, right?
Well, sure. Of course demand drives price. It isn't labor, it's demand.
But they're not saying labor drives price.
No, they're saying labor drives value. And that's also wrong. That's just patently wrong. Things have value because there are valuers, not because of labor.
But they would grant that kind of value, right? They're using value in a different way.
Yeah, that's bullshit. That's what I'm saying. It's bullshit. It's bullshit.
Okay. Could you understand it if you picked a different word than value, so that it doesn't get confusing? Just pick some other noise to represent what Marx meant.
The time spent, right? That's what labor time, right? Is that the proper way?
This is the aggregate average.
Yeah. I mean, that's right. Labor time.
Socially necessary, right? Labor time to reproduce a particular good at a particular place in a particular time.
Yeah, is the time spent making something confer value to it? Of course not. That's bullshit. Everybody knows that. It isn't the time spent on it. It's whether or not the on the demand side anybody values it. You can spend all the time you want making shit pies, but nobody's going to buy shit pies because they don't like shit pies.
Okay, but the labor theory of value doesn't say that if workers spent time making shit pies, then the shit pies.
This is a common objection. It's called the mud pie. It's called the mud pie objection. There's an adjustment for that. There's a response, but it's one of the objections, and it's perfectly valid. You can have a factory producing mud pies, but they aren't going to have any value. They're going to have zero value because nobody wants mud. Now there's a response to that, but I don't think the response adequately is an adequate response.
What do you think?
But that's the response.
What do you think the response?
There is a response. So mud pies possess no value, regardless of the labor time invested in them.
What about a mud pie throwing contest?
That would only be in virtue of their being valued by somebody on the demand side. They have
what do you think about my
value
response?
intrinsic
You
in
didn't
themselves.
really address anything I said yet that I can tell.
Oh, could you repeat then what
Look,
the
the
issue
theory
is?
says it does not apply to mud pies. Theory goes something like, hey, reproducible goods, and mud pies would not be one of those reproducible goods that has a use value, right? And then you're just saying, well, what about mud pies? But the whole claim is that we're not talking about mud pies. And then you say, yeah, but what about mud pies? Yeah,
because use value is just another way of smuggling in consumer
No,
demand.
I don't think that you're understanding how they are using the term use value. It's not just simply another man's garbage is another man's gold. A use value is a term to distinguish between items that don't have a use value, like a mud pie, versus reproducible goods that do have a use value, meaning that you can actually do something with it, has some sort of intrinsic utility or value. Mud pie has none of those things, and that's why they're not talking about mud pies. So
Yeah.
when you point out what about mud pies, you're just talking about something.
Except that mud pies have been sold in the past. They used to be sold in the South. You could go into stores and buy mud pies because people valued mud pies. And the reason they valued them
Yeah, and if they're
is
sold in the
because
store, they have a reproducible good at them.
they had a
If you go out
had
in
a
your backyard
value.
and make a mud pie, that's not a reproducible.
What do you mean? You can reproduce mud pies. Of course you can.
What if the distinction is merely that the item that isn't a mud pie is something that allows you to produce more other things, either more efficiently?
So the reason that mud pies had use value is because people valued them, because there was I believe, I haven't looked into it, but I sort of believe that there are myths around pregnancy and eating clay and things like that. There were folk myths about eating clay during pregnancy was somehow helpful to one's pregnancy. So and we've seen those similar kind of myths from indigenous people, poor people coming from Vietnam and other places where they have these myths that
Now
eating
what you're
clay.
talking about is not.
So mud pies actually have a use value.
Okay,
But
wait.
Now
Let me
what
just
you're
But
talking about.
it is strictly in virtue of the fact that people value it. It has
Can I say-
Yeah,
nothing
but
to do
now
with
the
the
scenario that you're
production.
bringing up is not. The scenario that you're bringing up is not incompatible with the labor theory of value, because now you are talking about a scenario in which they're reproducing mud pies as a good and there's a demand for it.
Yeah.
And then the labor theory of value would explain the equilibrium price of mud pies as a reproducible.
So what I wanted to
because
say-
the
what
labor
I wanted
theory
to
of
say-
value says it's the labor time that sets the value, but it's not.
Brenda, the idea.
You're
just
conflating
step
between
back.
value.
Yeah, there's a conflation between value and price, but just step back for a second, because if you think about the aim of the labor theory of value, just start there, right? So it's looking at a capitalist system as it runs, as it's functioning, and trying to determine what is it that's causing the equilibrium prices to settle where they settle. That's what this theory is aiming to do. It's finding the underpinning that drives and moves capitalism. So to say, well, wait a second, mud pies, or if you don't want to use mud pies because of this clay thing, some other fanciful good that could take time to produce but that nobody wants, defeats the labor theory of value, is just not to understand, in my opinion, what the labor theory of value is doing, which is trying to come up with an explanation, an underlying explanation for what's going on in capitalism. So mud pies don't get sold in capitalism. It's just not even related.
Do you think that there's a problem in economics of understanding why prices are what they are?
Yeah,
equilibrium.
There is a very serious problem. Nobody has an explanation that I know of, and I don't know.
Yeah, a loaf of bread is $2, Brenda. Why is a loaf of bread $2? Why isn't it $5?
It's the intersection of supply and demand. It's the intersection of supply and demand.
The question is, what causes the intersection to be where it is? That's the question.